Hi friends, welcome back to the channel. Today I'd like us to talk about depression, especially as it relates to men. Not that only men are affected by depression, but for the purpose of this video, I'd like to emphasize depression in the context of men and how it affects men. We are losing a lot of our brothers, we are losing a lot of our friends because of depression, and it's high time we really start talking about this enemy. We can't carry on like this. It's something that we need to start having continuous dialogues about. In this video, I just want us to think about the concept of depression. Hopefully by the end of this video, as a man, as a female, you will understand depression a little better, because as we will see later, some of the men are losing their battle with depression because of the pressure they're getting from their partners. So as a lady, as a female, if you're watching this video, you can also maybe learn something on how you can better support your partner so that we don't lose people unnecessarily to this enemy called depression. But before we get into it, I would first like to just read a textbook definition of what depression is, just so that we have a bit of context, before we get into the nitty-gritty of what I'm trying to share with you. So according to Wikipedia, depression is a mood disorder that causes a persistent feeling of sadness and loss of interest. Also called major depressive disorder or clinical depression, it affects how you feel, think, and behave, and can lead to a variety of emotional and physical problems. So that's obviously a textbook definition of what depression is. Having been a depression survivor myself, I don't know if I should call myself a survivor, because you'll never know with depression. It might come back, it might rebound, it might come back later depending on other factors that affect your life. But I've gone through depression, the worst kind of depression you can think of, and I understand the textbook definition of depression, but in simple terms, based on my own experience, depression, it's like a dark hole that you find yourself in, and no matter how hard you try to get out, it just seems impossible, and it's like solitary confinement. It's like you are locked up alone, even though there are people around you, but you are like in your own world, filled with negative thoughts, filled with doom, filled with hopelessness. It's a very unpleasant state to be in, and I think based on my experience, it usually starts off as worry, it starts off as concern, and it gradually graduates into fully fledged depression. And obviously there are different triggers. We are triggered by different things, as human beings. Someone else might be triggered by the loss of a loved one. Someone else might be triggered by losing a job, losing a house, failing an exam, not having your way, getting fired from your job. So we don't all have the same type of triggers, and it looks like it's based on what we value. If you are passionate about family, losing a loved one is a big deal, and it can trigger you into that depressive path. If you value material things, losing a house, losing a car could be a big deal to you, and that might be your trigger. So it's important to understand that depression is triggered by different things to different people. So if someone is going through depression after losing a loved one, or after losing a job, or after failing a test or exam, don't judge them based on that, because what you might see as something light, something unimportant, something that one can easily overcome and get over, might not be the case for them, because maybe they value their marks, they value their house, they value whatever material possessions that they've accumulated. So it's important to understand that we all have different triggers, and in order to start understanding depression, we really need to understand that particular fact about depression. We don't all have the same triggers. Something like divorce could be a trigger. Incurring debt, unending debt could be a trigger. Business failure could be a trigger. Another point that I would like to make about depression, or another truth that I would like to highlight about depression, is that it appears to be an abstract concept to many, and I think one of the reasons that is the case is because depression is a psychological or mental disorder. It's not a physical ailment, even though in severe cases it does manifest into physical, it does manifest physically, when you start having physical symptoms of depression. But primarily, or in general, depression is a mental disorder. It's psychological. Therefore, people who don't understand depression can say to you, just snap out of it, or it's all in your mind. It's easy to overcome this thing, but it's not easy until you go through it yourself, And the fact that it's not a physical ailment doesn't mean it's not real. An illness doesn't have to be physical to be real. There are mental illnesses out there. There are mental disorders, and I think culturally as well, especially in the Black community, we don't really understand things like depression based on how we were brought up in terms of our culture in general. We dismiss things like that to say, you've been bewitched, or you are just a negative person, but depression is real. And one of the reasons why people are losing their battle with depression is because of all these taboos and all these myths and all these false beliefs about depression. I think it's one of the reasons why men in particular don't want to admit that they are depressed, because it may come across as there's something wrong with them. They are not strong enough, or they've been bewitched. They're just trying to seek attention, but that is not always the case. You'll find that someone is going through real emotional pain that they don't know how to express, that they don't know how to deal with, and now and again they'll drop hints, statements that sort of give it away that no, this person is not okay. And sometimes when you ask someone, are you okay, the immediate response or the conditioned response is, I'm fine, only to find that there's more to it. That statement is not true. It's not a true reflection of what's happening in that person's life. So when you ask someone how you're doing, learn to really be genuine about it and ask more questions, ask more probing questions. If you really mean it when you're saying, how are you doing, then you'll be interested in going deeper. Find a way to really have people open up to you, because sometimes it's all about speaking to the right person. Opening up to the right person might just save a life. And contrary to popular belief, depression is not something that you can just snap out of, because there are triggers that led to that state, that led a person to be in that state. It's not something that you can just sleep and forget about. For instance, in a case of loss, maybe you lost a loved one, or you are breaking up with someone you never thought you could lose, or you're losing your job, you're losing money, you're losing your assets. Those are triggers. Those are roots that would somehow justify or trigger, depression. And it's not something you can just overcome. Life is painful. Life is full of loss. Life is full of rejection and disappointments. We all go through some type of loss, some type of rejection, some type of betrayal. And not everyone is able to deal with those things the same. There are people who I feel are somehow more prone to handling difficult circumstances. We are not the same. Something that someone else can handle might kill me, and the other way around, something that I can handle might kill someone else. because I'm somehow, maybe if you will, I'm anointed to carry that type of weight. That's why we need to be empathetic. That's why we need to not to judge each other, because what I can handle, you might not be able to handle, and what you can handle, I might not be able to handle it. And also back to the issue of value. What we value differs as well. My trigger is not your trigger. If I'm going through a depressive season and you say just snap out of it, it's only because you don't understand what I'm going through. You don't understand how I'm feeling. It's not as easy as that. Now, that doesn't mean that depression can be dealt with. I mean, in the case of loss, that's a genuine trigger. If you lose someone you love, it's a very traumatic experience. I know how that feels like. At some point I went through that and I never thought I could come back to be myself again. It was the hardest few months of my life. I almost gave up myself. I wanted to end it myself because I couldn't imagine my life without this person. That's how hard it was. Because I loved them, I valued them, I really, wanted to spend the rest of my days with them. Another truth that you need to understand about depression is that the symptoms can be both psychological and physical. Based on my experience, mild depression rarely develops into physical symptoms. It's only when your depression becomes major or more severe that you start experiencing physical symptoms like headaches, constant headaches, gut issues, issues with your stomach. In certain cases, you start developing certain skin conditions. So depression is quite a complex illness because everything is connected to the mind. The body is connected to the mind. So if there's something continually wrong with the mind, eventually it does affect the physical. It does ultimately affect your physical body as well. There are different manifestations of that in the physical sense. Because it's a psychological disease or illness, it becomes a bit difficult to treat. That is why usually, when someone goes through some traumatic event, they can maybe consult with a psychologist, and if they don't get better through that process, they might then consider seeing a psychiatrist who now starts bringing medicine into the mix, where you start taking sleeping pills, some depression medicine, depending on how severe your depression is. The psychological symptoms are very easy to identify, especially if you are someone who is quite aware of depression. And it differs per person, but things like thinking, overthinking, lack of sleep, disconnecting from other people, losing interest in things that you've always enjoyed, spending a whole lot of time alone, not talking as much as you used to, not eating enough, sometimes eating more than you used to. So those are the psychological symptoms. Things like being negative. Sometimes we accuse people of being negative, but you might find that it's because of certain experiences that they've had, that they've since formulated a narrative, a worldview that is now governing how they are leading their lives. So, negativity could be a sign of depression, where you don't see anything beautiful in the world, where you are hopeless, where you don't see any opportunities and possibilities because maybe you've been disappointed in the past, maybe you've lost things in the past, maybe you've failed significantly after trying certain ventures. So, those are the symptoms you need to look out for if you suspect that maybe someone close to you, a friend, a partner, could possibly be depressed. Sometimes you might even nip it in the bud before it gets out of hand if you look out for these various psychological symptoms, because they are always there. How people speak, there are signs, there are signals about depression just in how people speak, So look out for that. Don't just say, well, this person is going through a phase. Think about why they are doing what they are doing. If someone is always alone, if someone is no longer attending practice, they are disconnected from activities that they used to enjoy. You need to probe further. You need to find out what the issue is. And sometimes I understand that you can't help someone that doesn't want to be helped, but it's always worth the try, because losing someone over something that could have been prevented, is very painful. So rather try helping someone instead of you waking up later to say, why did I miss the signs? I should have tried harder to show this person that there's hope. I should have tried harder to support this person. And if after showing your support, if after going out of your way to try and help them, they still don't want to be helped, there's nothing much you can do about that. But it's important to understand these various signals of depression so that you can better help, so that you can better support someone that might need you in that state of vulnerability. The great thing about depression is that you can get out of it. It's all about admitting that you need help. It's all about understanding that in life there are failures, there are losses, there is pain, understanding that you may need a bit of time to deal with certain things. So it is possible to be healed of depression. It is possible to be cured of depression if you get the right support, if you maintain the right perspective, if you try your best to get out of that dark hole. You can get out. It's not something that once you have depression, then it's irreversible. You are stuck for life. You'll always be the depressed guy or girl. It can be cured. It's something that you can overcome. It is often said that depression is also caused by a chemical imbalance in the brain, and that one is usually triggered by not eating right, by putting your body under too much strain, things like that. So as much as depression is usually caused by pain and loss and suffering and all these negative things, but it's also made worse by certain lifestyle choices, not drinking water, and not sleeping enough, not resting enough. So that may somehow trigger some type of chemical imbalance that would then make you even more prone to major depression. If someone who doesn't eat right, someone who doesn't drink water, someone who doesn't exercise, someone who doesn't take care of their body, that person is more likely to fall into the pit because you already have a chemical imbalance caused by your lifestyle, and now you become more vulnerable to negative thoughts. You become more vulnerable to the pain that comes with loss, rejection. One of the primary instincts of depressed people is to isolate themselves. That is why depressed people like to be alone all the time. They don't like crowds. They don't like spaces where they can socialize with people because they have this voice in their heads that is constantly telling them that everything is hopeless, that their life is nothing but doom and gloom. So they tend to isolate themselves, and that is where the danger comes in, because when you don't spend time with people, when you constantly lock yourself in, one of the things that keeps us alive is the sunshine. So if you don't let the sun shine in, you're always indoors, curtains closed, it's easy for you to give in to the depression. It's easy for your depression to escalate because you're not feeding from the source of life. My woman likes to say, open the windows and let God in. That's a very powerful analogy. When you benefit from the sun, which nourishes plants, which nourishes animals, it's a source of life. It's important for you to get sunlight. And as people seclude themselves, as people isolate themselves, they obviously don't get the right support. They refuse the support. Leave me alone. I'm not okay. I'm going to deal with this my own way. When you do that, it's you and the negative self-talk. It's you and the voice in your head that says, it's not worth it. Give up. You've been trying for so long. No one likes you. Everyone hates you. Every woman that you've been with has left you. You can't keep a job. All your business ventures have failed. Everything that you've been trying to do so far has never materialized. You're a loser. Just quit. There's no hope for you. Why waste more time trying? Because there's no hope. That happens when you isolate yourself. But when you surround yourself with the right people will tell you that don't give up. The right people will share their own stories of how they overcame their own depression. The right people will tell you that losing things, losing someone, losing your job is not the end. But you are not going to hear all of that if you're constantly isolating yourself, where it's just you and that negative voice in your head. Identify those things in your friend, your partner. If they constantly isolating themselves, if they don't want to speak, I think that's another problem with men in particular, is that for some reason we are conditioned by society to keep things to ourselves, because if I speak, I'll be judged. You are weak. Be a man. Take it. Make a plan because you're a man. So because of that experience, then men decide not to say anything, because if I do, I'll become a meme on social media. If I do, I'm going to be the ridicule of my family. If I do, my woman will think that I'm a weak man. And one thing that we as men don't want is to be seen as not being manly enough by our partners or by our women. Some of the programming needs to be unlearned, because we are losing our brothers, we are losing our friends, we are losing men, because we were taught that if you speak about your vulnerabilities, if you speak about your fears, if you speak about your failures, then you are not strong enough, then you are not man enough. So what's the point of me opening up? And sometimes it becomes frustrating to the ladies, because you have a woman that wants to help you, you have a woman that wants to have a conversation with you, but your default setting is keeping this to myself. Your default setting is keeping it bottled up. That is why we have these sudden outbursts of anger, stories where this man killed his wife, he killed the children and turned the gun on himself as well. It's because he's been keeping in all these things to himself up to a point, you could call it the breaking point, where he couldn't take it any longer. There's power in releasing. There's nothing wrong with crying as a man, because you're not designed to handle everything. You are not God. That is why you need God. You need to cry out to God to say, I don't feel like I'm winning here. Help me out. There's nothing wrong with being vulnerable and saying, I need help. I can't do this alone. That's how you release. That's how you ease some of that pressure off yourself. Because if you keep on taking everything in without speaking, without releasing it, you are going to explode. You might kill yourself, you might kill your family, you might just do something terrible that will shock the world, because stuff has been building up inside of you. There was no outlet of release. You were trying to be this Superman that you were not designed to be. So we really need to address this pressure that we as men are taking, from the world. It could be coming from society. It could be coming from our families, our friends, our partners. You comparing yourself with a colleague, you comparing yourself with someone you went to school with. He has a big house, he has a successful business, and now you are comparing yourself with that person, not understanding that our paths are different, our callings are different, therefore we won't break through the same time, we are not going to succeed the same time. Understand your own journey. Stop comparing yourself with other people, because that pressure that you're putting on yourself by comparing yourself with other people is going to kill you. Imagine getting pressure from yourself, getting pressure from friends, getting pressure from family, getting pressure from colleagues. It becomes too much. You don't have to be Superman. If you're not yet ready to buy a car, then it's fine. It's not a gauge of your value. The fact that you got a car at 38, at 40, it doesn't mean that you are less of a man. The fact that you bought your first house at 45 doesn't mean that you are less of a man than someone who managed to get all those things at 25. Our paths are different. It doesn't mean that you're not ambitious. It just means that your journey is different, and it had to take you longer for a reason. There's always a reason. Nothing just happens. So stop taking so much pressure. Sometimes it's in the statements that some females make. I'll never date yellow pages. I'll never date someone without a car. And that's fine. It's your preference. But don't put pressure on other men because of your preferences. If you can't be with a man who doesn't have a car, that's fine. That's your choice. We can't dictate what kind of man you should date. But then understand that men are trying, understand that, the pressure that you're putting on men is killing them, because it's in our nature, it's built into us to want to be in control, to want to take charge. So if you are going to belittle us based on our achievements, based on what we do not have, you're killing us. And it's not like we're not trying, we are trying, but it could only be a matter of time until you also get to a certain level of success. Depression is not a sign of weakness. In fact, the person who admits that they need help is stronger than the person who's trying to absorb everything without, raising their hand to say, I'm drowning here. It's not a sign of weakness. You are human. Life is hard for everyone. If you go through a traumatic event, you lose a loved one, you lose a job, you lose a house, you go through a terrible breakup. That's a painful event, and it's expected for you to somehow react in some way because you lost something. A part of you was taken away from you. It's fine to cry. It's fine to seek help. It's fine to cry out to God to say, I don't know how I'm going to get through this, but you are my power. You are my source. Help me out of this situation. But you are not going to get help if you keep it to yourself, if you don't open up about what is killing you. You need to stop trying to be Superman. You are human. Humans were not designed to live in isolation. We are a community. Seek help, speak to someone, open up to your partner. Don't make a permanent decision over a temporary situation. Life is seasonal. This too shall pass. What you're going through will one day become a learning experience. Keep going. Don't give up on yourself. Don't give up on God. Things will improve. Things will get better. There is help. Seek for help. Don't put too much pressure on yourself. Believe that a brighter day is coming. And that brings us to the end of the video, guys. Hopefully you've learned something. And if you did, please like, share, and comment. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel as well if you haven't done so already. Until next time, goodbye.